Welcome to my throne of history. Actually, it's a chair in my living room with a black sheet thrown over it. But in history, you need to learn to use your imagination. So you better start using yours. From this throne, imagination, come on. From this throne, I'm going to take you on a journey of 10,000 years in 23 weeks. Crash helmet and full harness 5-point seatbelt probably required. We're going to go from 8000 BC until yesterday. Back in the time of COVID, there's a bit more history for you. Back in the time of COVID, I made a video for each of those 23 periods for children who were out of school because of lockdown. We're going to start by looking at the video I made for this period, and then you come back here to my throne. You've got it, haven't you? Yep. Come back here to my throne and I'll give you some more information and some ideas of how you could have a go at living in that period.
Try to remember.
Me again. This time you need to remember we're only doing 50 years. So much is happening. We could not possibly fit it all in if we were to do 100 years. It begins with George III on the phone. That's clever of him if he was, because we didn't have any phones. He was actually on the throne. Do apologise. But rather fascinatingly, in 1801, there was the very first census, and we tell you all about that. The reason it's interesting is because in this year, 2021, we have just had another census, which, if you didn't know about, ask your mum and dad, because they'll have had to have filled in a form either online or on paper. And the census happened every 10 years except in 1941 during World War II, and it gives a picture of life in England, well, and Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland as well, but basically a picture of life. How many people live in which country, in which county, everything. In this 50-year period, we look at England's most famous naval hero, Horatio Nelson, and the Battle of Trafalgar, which he essentially won, but he never knew he had because he was killed. As I said to you in one of the earlier things, the involvement of our country in the slave trade is nothing to be proud of. And in 1807, the actual slave trade was abolished, thanks in part to the work of a man called William Wilberforce. Other things to tell you about, well, there was an assassination of a British Prime Minister in 1812. In 1813, two people made a journey around Great Britain. What a good idea. But they only made it once. I know somebody who's going to try and make it 4 times. We then tell you a little bit about the Duke of Wellington, probably England's most famous soldier, and he won the Battle of Waterloo. Then we look quite a lot at the growing industrial revolution, where factories were springing up all over the place. We talk about the groups that didn't like this. There was a group called the Luddites who went around destroying as much of the machinery as they could. But we also look at a few other things in this 50-year period. We look at the great landscape painters, we look at the great romantic poets, and we also look at the great authors. All of that's on the website, you can find out about it. Then we have a look at the steam engine and the beginnings of the railway system. In 1830, George IV, who had actually succeeded George III, died, and that was the end of the Georgians, and also the year in which my school was founded. And I put a little bit about that on the website, just really to encourage you to go and have a think about your school. What's its history? What can you find out about? George IV was succeeded by William, but he only lasted 7 years before Queen Victoria became Queen of England. And Queen Victoria was Queen of England for the whole of the next 50-year period. We have a quick look at the first postage stamp. Tell you something about children being used in coal mines and in the factories and how it was stopped. And we also look at the epidemic there was of cholera. So that's that period of history, 1801 to 1850. On the hoots, we have a look at housing. Loads of people coming into towns to work in factories. They had to be provided with homes, so there were what were called back-to-back houses. And as usual, we look at clothes, food, daily life and culture. All of that you can find out by going to the hoots section of the website. And our story that in this period is about a little girl, Helen Trotter, who was actually working in a factory and what happened to her when she had to stop working there. So that's it. 1801 to 1850, the end of the Georgians. Back next week with the Victorian age. See you then. So that's the end of the Georgians, and during that period there was the first ever census. Well, it really wasn't the first ever census, because William the Conqueror and Doomsday Book was essentially a census, but it was the first in a regular series of a census every 10 years. Every time there's a 1 at the end of the year, we have a census. We didn't have one in 1941, but there was one 4 years ago, and every household has to complete a form saying who's living there and blah, 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 and lots of other things. Then we had two famous soldiers, sailors, warriors, whatever you like to call them, Nelson and Wellington. Finally, we abolished the slave trade. Well done, not before time. It was a period of great writers, authors, great painters, poets. It was also when we had the very first stamp. You bought a stamp, it's called a penny black, but in fact it didn't last very long because people discovered that they could actually forge it. So it soon became the penny red, because that was apparently more difficult to forge. I have no idea why. The stamp was actually invented by a man called Rowland Hill. So unlike Richard Cromwell in the previous one, who for some reason wasn't great, but was called Richard, Rowland managed to get the hang of being great with that name. So he did remarkably well. And it was also at the beginning of this period a time of great change with factories. The Industrial Revolution started. Factories came along and took away the work that ordinary people had been doing. And a lot of people didn't like that. There was a group called the Luddites who would go around the factories, especially in the northwest of England, and smash up the machinery. They weren't called a terrorist organisation, but you know, they didn't like what was going on. Now, what we're going to do is slightly beyond interesting. I'll let you watch the video, but I was gobsmacked. I have never believed anything was going to work that did. So if you want to make one of these, go ahead and do it. Watch the video. Here we are again, another have a go, and this time the period is the end of the Georgians. Yes, you've done that joke before. The end of the Georgians is the Ians. Just look at the spelling of it. I'll just put it up there in case you can't see it. Yes, you're very clever. So we've come to the end of the Georgians, and we're going to make something. This is probably the most complicated have a go we've done. But if it works, that will be something. Right, what we're going to do, well, let's go back a bit. The ancient Greeks talked of something called a camera obscura. And it was a way of taking a picture, basically. And what we're going to show you how to do today, and this, I admit, it's quite expensive because you have to get a lot of special equipment. Actually, it's probably not that expensive, but But anyway, we're going to show you how to do it. We're going to make what is called a pinhole camera. Do we have to buy pins? No. Well, then it's not expensive. No. We're actually going to use a cardboard box and some black paint and some special photographic paper and a lamp, and we're going to develop it and we're going to see what happens. Because it was about this time that people began to see if they could actually take photographs. And I'm just going to show you this photograph here, which is of my great, and I have no idea how many greats there should be, grandmother and her daughter. The great, I don't know how many greats there should have been, grandmother died in
1877.
She was born in 1789, which was when the French Revolution started, if you know that. Any Frenchmen watching? Well, that of course is 1789. In 1789, that's when she was born. If we assume her daughter looks about 20 and maybe she had her daughter when she was 30 years old, if we say this picture was taken 50 years after her birth, then that would be about 1830, 1840. It may have been a bit later than that. She may have been a bit older. But anyway, this picture was not, well, I was going to say not like you do it, where you send it off to the chemist and have it printed and get it back. Sorry, that's how I used to do it. You just take a picture on your phone, which all of you seem to think is called a camera, but it's not, it's a phone. And then you look at it. Well, that's not how it used to be. Even in my day, you used to have a roll of film in the camera. We've got it all on the website. Anyway, you can go and have a look at the year is that year there. Go and have a look and you'll see the sort of camera I used when I was a young boy. Yes, it is lucky I'm still alive. But there we are, that's what it was. But what we're going to make is a pinhole camera. And that photo of my great, I don't know how many grandmothers, was printed on glass. Not on paper, and not on your phone, but that's how far things have changed in what, 150 years? What will be happening in 150 years' time? I won't be alive. You're so chirpy. Anyway, join us now as we try and make a pinhole camera. Okay, see ya, bye.
As I explained, this is probably the most difficult have a go we've put up, and therefore all we're going to do is take you briefly through what we did and then show you the end result. So this is the equipment that we needed, and down the bottom right hand side are three specialist things that you'd have to buy. The two bottles contain chemicals for developing photos, and the large A4 envelope contains photographic paper. The other stuff is fairly simple and you could probably have lying around, except perhaps the spray can of black paint. So in order to make a pinhole camera, you need a box, and you need to spray the inside of that box black and make sure that there are absolutely no holes in it at all. There is no way that light can get in. Everything inside is black. You then cut out a little square hole in the front and put over that a metal sheet. But the metal sheet has a very small hole in it. Make it with a needle or something like that. You then cover that hole. Don't push the paper down too hard because you're going to have to take that cover off at some stage. That then is how you make your pinhole camera. Now, inside your pinhole camera box, so don't seal the lid down because you'll have a problem if you do, on the opposite side to the hole, you need to put, glossy side facing out, a piece of photographic paper. Now, we cut in half the A4 size, and then using black sticky tape, we stuck that to the side of the box. Close the lid,
Once again, make sure there's no holes and you have your pinhole camera. What we then did is we went outside and our model, the well-known Owlbut owl, stood on the side of a wall. We set the pinhole camera up opposite him, and for 30 seconds we removed the cover over the small hole. So the sun was attracted, hopefully, if there was sun, to the metal strip, and inside the camera the image that could be seen was portrayed onto our photographic paper. At the end of 30 seconds we closed it. Then we had to do the developing, which I couldn't even show you pictures of if I wanted to, because it has to be done in the pitch black, although you can use a small infrared light which doesn't affect the developing of the picture. What you do is you open your camera, you take your little bit of photographic paper out very carefully, and then you put it in a solution known as the developer. You leave it in there for whatever time it says on the bottle, and then you put it in another solution or just in ordinary water, and that other solution would be called the stopper. That stops the developer working. It's well named. You then put it into a third solution, which is called the fixer, and you'll never guess, yep, that fixes the image onto the piece of paper. And then you once again put your piece of photographic paper into some water to stop the fixer overfixing. And at the end of it, and this is where I was honestly absolutely staggered, this is the picture that we had. It's in black and white, obviously, but I think you'll agree it is absolutely amazing. So if you want to have a go at making a pinhole camera, do. You will need a lot of adult help because you'll be using these chemicals and you have to be very, very careful with them. But the end result is absolutely amazing. And as I said in my little chat with Owlbut at the beginning, it is a bit expensive. You can get a starter kit on the internet quite easily, but it does cost you some money. So that's the have a go for this week, the end of the Georgians. We'll be back next week.
Is that, or is that not, the most amazing thing? Well, it is, I'm telling you now. The very first one of these sort of cameras used was by a Frenchman called Louis Daguerre, and he took the very first picture of a human being, and I'll put the picture up so you can have a look at it. There's a man, I think by the looks of it, it looks as though he might have his foot up on a footrest and somebody might be cleaning his shoes for him. But I just, if you don't do anything else of our have-a-goes, and it's going to be difficult to do this one because you've got to buy some extra equipment and stuff, but amazes me how people invent things. Anyway, so that's the end of the Georgians, and next, except
This was a time when the wealthy people had magnificent mansions.
Do you think your family ever did?
They might have done on my father's side, maybe. It would be like the grandfather built the actual house first.
Nice.
Yep. And then perhaps the father would add on the west wing.
Getting bigger.
Yep. And then the son would add on the east wing.
Then what would happen?
They'd fly away.
Silly. Houses can't fly.
There's a joke, Molly.
Well, I suppose a high-rise flat might be said to be flying, but not a house. You need to improve your jokes, Richard.
Yeah, I'll work on it.